So, very warm welcome to this second session on second panel discussion on effective teaching practices, being organized by Parimal and Pramod Chaudhary Center for Learning and Teaching. The center, which has been uh, started very recently in IIT Bombay about a year ago, and one of our main aims is to promote and support pedagogy by supporting innovation, evidence-based practices, and collaboration. So, among the variety of things that the center wants to do, we want to record experiences of our best teachers, the way they deal with the teaching challenges that we are facing today, and how we can take their experiences, turn them into good practices for improving teaching in our institute. So we have many awards given by the institute, both in the domain of research and teaching. And all of you are aware that for research, IRCC organizes interaction sessions with awardees. So IIT Bombay community, faculty, students get a chance to interact with award-winning faculty. Taking a clue from this in a similar line, the center wants to start this activity as a yearly activity every year from now on. So this panel discussion is about effective teaching practices. Today panel members are Professor M.C. Dev. I'll invite panel members on the Professor M.C. Dev from Civil Engineering, Professor Gaitonde from Mechanical Engineering, Professor Punekar from BSBE, Professor Ashok Joshi, Professor T.K. Biswal from Earth Sciences, Professor G. Mohan from Earth Sciences, Professor George, Professor C.B. George from HSS, and Professor M. Radhakrishna from Earth Sciences. So, to begin with, let me take this opportunity to congratulate all our colleagues on receiving prestigious SP Sukhatme Award in Excellence in Teaching for 2018. And let me start this panel discussion. Well, I want them to reflect on what are the challenges that we face today in teaching and what are their secrets of handling this. Maybe I'll add a little bit more to this if they can also talk about how they handle weak students in their class. Maybe take a minute or two to talk about this. Then there's one more thing that I want to know, that what is the secret formula for Earth Sciences? 3 faculty members from Earth Sciences have earned this prestigious award, which is quite impressive. And we would like to know your secrets so that all of us are able to emulate. So let me begin with Professor Dev.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I thank the organizers of this event for inviting me. And I think this kind of interaction should be indeed very useful to all stakeholders of teaching and learning process. Now, basically I have taught, like all of you, the core courses as well as the elective courses at UG and PG level. And based on that, I'm going to speak for about 4 or 5 minutes. Now, basically, and to be frank, I built on the errors, if I may say so, or deficiencies, if I may say so, of my own teachers. Actually, they were very excellent professors, no doubt. But when it comes to effective teaching, I noticed certain problems, and I tried to, remove them from my own teaching. So in this connection, I can say that almost in my every lecture and every topic, I try to relate everything that I teach with with the practice that goes on in the real field, and in that way I keep the interests of the students continued. For example, when I solve any problem, I just tell them how this situation is handled in design firms, using which method and using which type of code, etc. So when I relate the teaching of every topic with the professional practice or the field activities, then I find that the students pay attention, and the teaching probably becomes more effective. Now, this thing comes because of, if I may say so, my association with very large number of outside organizations, including the various national laboratories, the government regulatory bodies, the PSUs, and even private companies with whom I have interacted with. So all these interactions gave me an excellent input in teaching and in keeping me abreast of the current professional practice, as well as the typically the plans, let us say, of the various laboratories and so on. Now, at the same time, especially when it comes to PG teaching, the various external projects that I handle, both commercial as well as non-commercial nature, they also provided an excellent input to me in my teaching. Now, another input that came to my teaching is from the various MTech as well as PhD project, thesis and dissertations, and they also helped me in giving so many detailed and state-of-the-art information to the students. So all these things I think are necessary. So in short, I will say that what we are doing, all our activities help us and reflect us in our teaching. So teaching need not be viewed as an isolated kind of activity. Its input is always derived from research, consultancy, even various administrative type of works that we do within institute and outside the institute. So all these things help us in effectively managing our teaching. Now there is one thing that many times we have to handle very large classes and also for a longer period of time, 1.5 hours. Now it is very difficult to sustain the interest of the students for such a long period. So in that way, so towards that we have to keep on changing our teaching style, I may say. Sometimes you have to go on talking, sometimes you have to show some small videos, sometimes you have to encourage some small discussion or ask some students to speak about something. So all these things are necessary if you want to keep the students completely attentive for the entire period of 1.5 hours. I think I'm sure many of us must be trying this, but I am repeating. Now, in short, and without probably spending, frankly speaking, as regards the weaker students are concerned, let me speak very frankly that honestly, I have not tried anything to pay special attention to them, and this is all I can say, because unless I have done something, I don't want to comment on that. Now, finally, I can just say that in my teaching, I have tried to lay more emphasis on quality of delivery rather than the quantity, because I'm not I don't think that we should fill the minds of students like a cement bag which is just almost full, and you go on pouring the material pack it to the fullest of its capacity. So instead of going by the quantity of teaching and observing that every class from minute to minute, starting minute to ending minute is finished, I think it is better if we focus on the quality of the delivery. So these are some of the things which I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dev. I'll request now Professor Joshi to.
Thank you, Professor Patwardhan, for organizing this, in my opinion, extremely important activity, which as primarily teachers affect all of us. I mean, over the last close to 28 years that I have been involved with it, there have been various challenges at different times. I mean, what I have found is that challenges also keep changing shape as the profile of student changes, the institute way of functioning changes. What I have found noteworthy over the last maybe 5 or 10 years has been two specific points which I will mention and also discuss in some detail. One is where to position the curriculum of a course. This has been a constant struggle from my side to decide whether it should be aimed at top 10%, middle 40%, or if there is a way by which it can be all-inclusive. The reason why I mention this challenge is that if you position it to an average, which probably doesn't exist, at least I have noticed in a few courses that very quickly the top 10% switch off their mind, they kind of get disinterested because they think it's elementary, going too slow. If on the other hand I try to bring in a slightly higher level material, then I can clearly see blank faces in the class, which tells me that there is a reasonably big section which is not following what I am saying. So this has been a constant struggle, which I still consider that it's a challenge that I have not found a very effective solution to this problem, because contents are written, they are only words, but ultimately the level at which it gets positioned is ultimately what makes difference to a, let us say, a good or a competent delivery, or probably not a good and not so competent delivery. The other challenge which I have found over the last 5 years particularly is to get students to class. This is something which maybe my misplaced thought process, that if you can get them to the class, chances are that they will listen to you for some part of the lecture and something will stick with them. So that even if they don't have time to study later, at least it will make their life a little easier in the time of exams or when they are trying to solve a slightly complicated problem. What I have done is I have tried number of tricks. That's all what I can call them. They are only tricks. Over the last 2 years, some things which I have tried seems to have worked. That's what I seem to feel from the faces of the students and the kind of participation that I have seen. What I do is to introduce small objective type tests in each lecture, and that is somewhere in the middle of the class. So it serves two purposes. One, it does keep people on their toes, a little bit alert, because they have a tendency of kind of switching off somewhere in the middle if the lecture is a bit long, as Professor Dev was mentioning. What I do is to introduce a small, about 7 to 8 minutes of a set of objective questions, and this is in lieu of their attendance requirement. So I don't, at least over the last 2 years, I have stopped enforcing. Earlier I used to do that and I found that it was not really working out. So I don't enforce attendance, but this is what I do. And the fact that they are at regular intervals, there is a certain amount of push on their side to refresh, at least at some point before the next class, as to what was covered in the last class. So that we all know that if you repeat a thing a couple of times, you understand it better. So that's one thing which I have tried, which seems to, at least this is what my understanding is. Of course, only the students have to really come and say how to what extent this has been successful. With regard to weak students, what I have tried to do, even though it's a slightly sensitive subject, because you cannot really do too much in that. what I try to do is that at the halfway level, I tell my TAs to give me a list who are going to be below certain level. And then I send them an individual email. All those maybe handful of people to say that in case they have specific difficulties, they can come to me, discuss. Is there any specific portion that they are not following? And sometime if somebody comes, but it's a purely voluntary. I mean, there is no way I can push people. So I also tell them, can get your mentor along so I can talk to the mentor and find out if there is something specific that is bothering the student. So with these small little tricks that are there, I mean, at least I find that the content seems to be reasonably received by a larger section of students, which I think is probably the overall objective, that without playing favorites, you should be in a position to give a reasonable idea of the content to a larger section of the class. So with that, I would like to close my opening comments. Thank you.
It is very difficult to discuss, or describe, how I teach. Very difficult. Only a student can say how I teach, or what steps I take for the last students. Only he can say. But I make one point. The first class I go, I make the environment very relaxed. When they see me, a bulky person with the face swollen, all of them become tense. But on the first class itself, I make it very relaxed. That is the art I am having. I am not boasting for it, but that art I am having. How to make everybody yours. Yes, many techniques are there that comes spontaneously with me. Like I'll tell you, Janvi is there, I just found very happy that she is in the audience. She is the assistant professor in our department. She was our students in 2010 batch, isn't it? 2010 batch. I generally take attendance by myself. I read, Krishna, I look at him. Then, in one class, there are two Krishnas. One Krishna, a girl, another Krishna was a boy, So she immediately asked whether Krishna is a boy or girl. The students becomes really, this person is not so strict, When he is talking story like this, Krishna is a boy or girl, definitely they are relaxed. Then many things comes out of it, how Krishna is a girl, how Krishna is a boy, all these things follow, So that is how I make the class relaxed. This is not for the first class. Every class, it comes spontaneously with me. I make the environment very calm. And the last students which you talk, the last students, how he reacts with you. He becomes also equally relaxed. And you will not believe, in one class, in maximum times he asks questions to me. Maximum times he asked the questions to me. So I felt very happy that when he is asking questions, definitely all of them, or all the toppers have understood the things. And another point I make it like this, I give the marks on the first class itself. How? Their mid-semester is 30 marks, end semester is 50 marks. And generally I don't take quiz because I don't have time to see your notebooks, But I regularly take some interactive sessions. Like, you have to ask a question. However silly it may be, however loose it may be, you just ask a question. Because my class is relaxed, so everybody asks a questions. And with a lot of patience, I answer their questions. So gradually more and more interactions comes into picture. So this is one of the things I do in the class, so that everybody asks the questions to me. Even though the portions I have planned to teach is left to the next class. Does not matter. Then, I say how it is very easy to score the marks. How? After each class, whatever portions I taught, I sent 10 questions to all of them by mail. These are the questions that will definitely come in the exam. You just read this. But it is never came. But only I send the questions. So every class I send my questions. So like 200 questions will be there at the end of my course. Only few questions come, but they are all prepared. Because sir बोला है यही सब आएगा. Usually they have read all those portions and come prepared, and really they do well. The last person also does well because he knows the questions. These are the things will come. By the way, he has covered the entire syllabus. So that is the one thing I do. And I give lot of importance to the attendance. Those quiz 20 marks, I give to the attendance. If you come, 95% of your attendance is there, you will get A grade. So people come for A grade to attend that 95% of attendance. This is some sort of, incentives. Government of India is giving. Ye karo, wo karo. Like this, I give incentives to them. So they come, I think all my courses, all my classes, I have full strength. That is my achievements. So these are some of the things I do. I love my students to core of my heart. I don't take teaching as a profession. I take it as a passion. I always think, I always dream. While eating also I think about the teachings. So that is how I evolve it. So I cannot express how do I teach, but definitely I teach in a good manner. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. After Professor Biswal speaks so well, as I mentioned last time also, become very formal. Well, I have never been a born teacher, in fact. It's 25 years since I've been teaching, and finally I received an award. I guess it is only a culmination of a lot of hard work or that experience gathered over the past 25 years. Initially, I was taking it as a profession only, but I realized that unless you connect with students, you don't really become a good teacher. That realization has come rather late to me. But then I realized that the courses which I teach, there's a lot of diversity in it. In the sense that the classroom has got students from different backgrounds. Like I teach courses on earthquake and engineering seismology, where I have students from JE as well as JAM. They're not on the same level. They're different competence completely. And their requirements are different. Their approach is different. And their strengths are different. And still, bigger challenge I face is the courses which I teach in geophysics, which are taken by geology students, MTech students. Now, geology and geophysics may look very new to you, but basically as geophysics is basically from physics background, and geology is a non-mathematical background, I would like to say. It's more a descriptive subject. But I teach the same course to both of them. So it means there are two ends of the same spectrum. So how do you teach these people? And that is one challenge. The second challenge which I face is about the availability of online resources. Especially the courses we teach, you got wonderful examples online, plenty of resources with complete PPTs, lecture notes delivered. So that is a challenge because if a course is taught by MIT professor, well, I don't know whether I'm better than MIT professor, but certainly I would like to teach better than them. And the third challenge which I have faced is that requirements of the course. Well, you may have a course which could be optional to some students, but which is core because of the fact that it is mandatory for the students. The students take it because it is mandatory, not because they like it. So we have to also explain why I need to take this course. So to address these challenges, then we have to go for three things. One is you have to plan it accordingly, then you have to implement it, and then finally assessment. These three things, planning, implementation, assessment, for every course is very important. And whenever I go to the classroom, first is I need to address all these things. So first is, how do you make a student interested in the course? First is, you got to arouse his interest. Then you have his intention. How do you arouse the interest in a student? He thinks it's a course I have to attend is mandatory. So luckily for me, I teach courses where I can get live examples. Probably you might have heard of that recent Indonesia earthquake on Friday. Well, I have got a record of that with me, and we also got a teachable experience of that in PPTs available to you. Students are not aware of that. So I use these things in the classroom. But apart from Indonesia earthquake, probably very few must have heard that there is an earthquake in Thane. Well, we have a record of that. I take that in the classroom, show it to them. So they're interested. And not only that, I make use of these data sets in the lab also. So students work with real data, live data in fact. So that's how their interest is generated. So that's first thing I do. And second is, especially BTech students, they are not interested in anything which is descriptive. They want only think quantitative things. And when it's engineering seismology, they want which is application oriented. So I keep drilling into them, yes, these are the courses which have got applications. And I tell them what are the applications in every single class. Wherever I teach this seismology, I tell them why it is important, how is it important, why you should use it. And this ensures that students have some interest in the class. Otherwise, if I just go on teaching because it's mandatory for me, students would not be interested. The other part is regarding the assessment. Well, I take quizzes, I take mid-sem and sem and all that. If a person doesn't do well in the quiz, I ensure that a quiz is optional and given to all of them. And I'll tell them, okay, whichever is the best, you can take. Best out of 2. Even the students who have scored well, ensure that they write it. So the point is not to penalize the student because he's done badly, but to ensure that they learn more and they study and come again. And that has been very successful for me, and I find that most students are happy that the quizzes are being held again. This is one thing I always do. And regarding attendance, I tell them that 80% is mandatory. I do take attendance in the class, as I said, with names, so that I know the students also, and they also know me. So that ensures that amount of familiarity comes to the students. I'm always available to students, even after office hours, if required. And I'm approachable. I'm not a very strict person who will keep a student at hand's length. I don't do that. So in that way, they don't fear me, first and foremost. So sometimes they will not attend classes, that's all right. So I don't, I think students also need to be treated well. I don't think they should be treated with disdain because they're not performing well. They've got their own strengths, they've got their own weaknesses. Everyone has got strengths and weaknesses, and we need to recognize them. So I feel that students' voices should be heard, and their views and opinions also should be respected. So that's what I do. Thank you.
So, thank you, Professor Patwardhan, for this initiative and the invitation. As I said, when these awards were given away on the 5th of September, that I have never thought that I am worthy or I deserve this award. It actually surprised me. But it also gave me some kind of a confirmation about things I do in the classroom, so that I am happy, which is what I want to share. And I don't know whether you know, but I'm from the humanities department. I teach philosophy. So I think this award is coming to me because I taught a big introduction to philosophy course 301 for about 3 years sometime back. So I don't, there is no law of good teaching, I am sure. There are only, we are speaking about things that we found useful or things that we found working. So that's what I want to say. You know, in the 18th century, there's a poem called The Village Schoolmaster. I suppose most of us know. This is a poem by Oliver Goldsmith. So it's actually part of a longer poem called The Deserted Village. So Goldsmith seems to be looking at this schoolmaster who seems to be a great person, who has all the knowledge, who is admired by everyone, who is also feared by the students. And the students laugh at the jokes even if there's nothing funny in it because they fear him so much. And some of the villagers even say how his small head can contain so much knowledge, like they wonder. But actually, Goldsmith calls the admirers as gazing rustics. So actually the poem is quite ironic. The schoolmaster doesn't have all that knowledge, which people think he has. But this kind of ideal of teachers today is quite unfashionable. It's not there, we must say. Today, knowledge has come out of the people's, the great people's mind, and it's there in the books, it's there in the internet. So students have, others also mentioned, students have all the kinds of knowing facilities available. And we say that this is democratization of knowledge. We also say that we have to take a learner-centered approach. So this is what I sometimes, I think this comes a little natural to me because of the subjects I teach. But one thing that I definitely do is to try to show that I respect the students, also that I love them. I don't know why, this is one comment I often get, that they were interested because the professor was showing interest. So some kind of passion, if it cannot animate your teaching, although you're not very sure how this can be done, as Professor Biswal also said, who is best in the institute almost many times, he has won the award. So this is one thing about teaching that I do, which I definitely encourage and advocate, that we need to treat the students as people who already know a lot. And we should give them space to challenge the ideas which we place in front of them. So we cannot go with anything like revenge punishment, or, a student who questioned me, I will take on him or her. This type of approaches never work in today's classroom. I have taught also in ordinary colleges, in an NIT before coming here. So actually, as teachers, our life is very simple here. Students are great. Many of they are the best students in the country. They also behave very well in the classroom, most of them. They may not come, but if they come, they do not disturb your teaching. But this is not the average classroom in the country. So it's all the more reason that we should respect and, see the student as someone who is there to be respected and loved. That doesn't mean the classroom should become unmanageable. Everything is all right. See, there was once I was waiting for a lecture in LA 101. So there was another lecture going on, which was going on very well, very charismatic teacher. But after the lecture, one student, I was setting up my laptop for my lecture. So I heard this student telling the professor that today's lecture just went over my head. I couldn't understand a single thing. So the professor is saying to the student, it's not really important that you understand things in a lecture. It's not even important that you should come to the lecture hall. Learning is your individual affair. It should happen between you and your paper and pencil, and work it out. So though he is a great teacher, he was trying to give an impression, I thought to myself, that there's nothing really it has nothing really to do with the teaching, which I disagree. So if we are asked, of course this is going to be a trend which is happening all over, but I would say that it's important that students come to the class and engage with the teacher. This is one way in which education has always been. And education is not simply saying, everything is, it's important to correct students' knowledge. It's important to correct students' social habits, which all happens, and learning as a social activity should happen in the classroom. So this is the way education is always, because, for example, when the child is born, we are telling the child a lot of don'ts. Please don't litter. Please don't call people names of that sort. Even we say that 2 and 2 does not make 5 but 4. So this kind of thing is always going on. So that shouldn't be stopping, and it's learning as a simple individual affair, for me, does not make sense. Weak students, again, as others also mentioned, weak students I have taken at least in a big classroom, special notice. I have asked TAs to cater to them. And our students are also PhD students. Sometimes weaker students, I give a lot of time to them. That's what I could say. Thank you.
First of all, I'm very happy to see that such a thing has been organized for the first time. And then I'm very happy to be amongst these on the dais, and particularly in front of those some of the people who have organized many workshop on effective teaching in IIT Bombay couple of years back. Then some of the things I am expressing here may not be really applicable for large classrooms where hundreds of students will be there, and then some of the things may some people may agree or may not agree. But last suppose last 20-25 years, if you look at the growth in number of research projects and faculty responsibilities towards other jobs other than teaching have tremendously increased. So that means a teacher is at some pressure to deliver a good teaching material. So first of all, we all should understand that it is not a burden. Going to class is not a burden, but going to class is a part of our duty to bring the young budding talents, to make them whether knowledgeable or not, make them knowledgeable towards the making their career, as well as the making their whatever they understand and focusing their knowledge towards that goal. This is my personal opinion. As my other colleagues have told, and then Professor Paspadan asked, what is the secret in earth sciences? So my first was that our numbers are only maybe 20 and 30, 35. So, but normally what I do is, when I go to class, I make some statements. These are attendance is not mandatory for me. Having said that, second thing will follow. What is that? I always say that students, what is this particular subject, why it is so important for them to learn, and why it is the last opportunity they get as a student in their career. I tell them that if you do not, suppose MSc Geology students in their third semester, when I teach, first class I emphasize that if you do not attend my class, I have no problem, please, you are free. But if you do not attend, you will lose is the concepts of geophysics for your lifetime, you lose and you are out. Because in the professional world outside, no one will teach you, not even your closest colleague. Okay, so this kind of things you can try with the students by not imposing attendance. At the same time, luckily what happened is some of these tricks work with the students, and then mostly 90% of the students attend my classes. Second thing is, we have several geophysical methods. When we teach, we always have to give them industry-related examples. Why entire? Because industry orientation. Because 90% or 95% of the students are interested in some industry-oriented jobs. They are, in our geophysics, unfortunately, they are all skewed towards a particular subjects. So making them understand and making them uniformly knowledgeable in all subjects is a big challenge in our course. But I keep on telling them, whenever there is an opportunity, I keep their concepts, why, though there are 6 geophysical methods, why all these can be unified into a single concept, and then why are all same? Okay, that is one thing. Second thing is, whether they have practicals or not, I see that all of these people gets enough practical knowledge by way of conducting practicals out of the course. I don't have to do it, but I try to do it by conducting some practical, so that people will have some awareness of these things. Because ours is a field-oriented subject, so giving them some field orientation will provide them some extra edge. And then I sometimes take some of the MTech or MSc final year students beyond this one on try to take either 1 or 2 days to take to some industry place, ONGC or somewhere, try to give them some kind of practical application of this. Third most important thing, what Professor Joshi mentioned, that it's very, very important to see that the bottom 50% are getting benefited of the course. At the same time, top people get enough material for their benefit. So because of this small classroom size, some of us we are able to achieve that by personal interactions. At the end of the day, I am connected with all 100% students. That's all.
Thank you, Professor Patwardhan. I think let me begin by saying what I said that day when I received the award, that if I am a good teacher as perceived by the students, then that goodness has come out of my ability to imitate the good behavior of many of my teachers and keep away from not so good styles. And similarly, the feedback provided by the students directly or indirectly, including the body language feedback. Then I find that the goodness has come perhaps because of the variation in my style of teaching. The variation was necessary for maybe 2-3 reasons. The first reason was, over the last 38 years or so, in another 7 days I will be completing 38 years in the campus as a faculty. I have taught various courses, but even if you take one particular course, the content, the expected style of teaching, and sort of what we today call learning outcomes were different in the early 80s, and not entirely different, but significantly different now. Even the style of examination had changed, and also the character of students have changed. When I started, the 5-year program was in its last few years. 1981 we started our 4-year program, and in that decade things changed. Then in the next decade, 90s, slowly the internet and other electronic media started becoming popular. The number of sources increased, and then we had a tremendous blow up of information on the internet, and that provided information to students which was not available to them so easily earlier. And because of that, the whole style of teaching for even a given course changed. Coming to a particular detail of teaching, I think a few things are important. The first thing is, because nowadays any amount of information is available, it is good to provide links to students for them to explore. That actually reduces our load as teachers. Particularly descriptive things or even routine derivations. We say that look this up before you come to the next lecture. Even if a few students look it up, appreciate that, and are able to interact with you in class, I think that's positive. Apart from external links, to keep interest of the students, it is necessary to provide in our curriculum or in our teaching and the layout of subjects, backward links. So when you teach thermodynamics, provide backward links to physics, chemistry, and even to mathematics. So they realize that, look, something which we studied in our high school or in our first year is now useful in the second year. Once they appreciate that, then in the course, as you go further, you start providing further links, saying, I'm leaving it here, but this you will explore in a follow-up course on, say, fluid mechanics or heat transfer or energy conversion. That way, the interest of the students, at least a few students, will remain in the mainstream of courses. Another thing is, even if other things don't change, I think our style of teaching and our style of evaluation should keep on changing slowly over the years. Because otherwise, our teaching becomes stale. We will mechanically go and teach the same thing if we don't change something. And one question was asked, how faithful should be to our curriculum? Fortunately, in IIT Bombay, the typical course content is of the order of 150 words. And I think we are in heaven because of that. Because that gives us the spirit of the course, not the real lecture by lecture detail of the course. I happen to be, forced onto the board of studies, which is something like our, DUGC or DPGC outside. And my God, they have units, and finally you have to come up with almost week by week or a, lecture by lecture specification. I said, look, this is what are you telling the teacher to do? The goodness of the teacher, his own interest and style, it's just being, it's like asking a khayal singer to say, oh, this should be the first tan, this should be the second tan, then the fun will go out of that recital. And in fact, not only the style of teaching, even the mechanics of teaching should change. Because if a student who has registered for your course, say in 2010, if for some reason after 5-6 years he comes and attends a part of your course, he should feel that, look, the content is the same, but the way it is presented is different. That way even his interest should remain. And that could be way of presentation or even way of evaluation. 2 months ago, we had one Professor Freud here, and he conducted a workshop which I couldn't attend, but he gave a lecture, I think, in this hall or a similar hall. And the final extract of his thing was, any different way you teach, it's better for the students. Go away from the traditional, monotonous lecture thing. Anything which you change is definitely good for the students. So I think keeping on changing is one of the main issues here. And Professor Patwardhan, you asked a specific question. What do you do for weaker students? Okay. I think along with weaker students, the toppers also have to be treated separately. Particularly coming to weaker students, I think more than half of my problem with weaker students gets solved the moment I conduct the first few quizzes. And I typically conduct 6 or 7 quizzes. So the first 2 are over within first 3 or 4 weeks. I plan it like that. And I take, say, the bottom 10% of the class and call them up. Okay? And just the fact that they are being observed will improve about 80% of them. For the remaining few students, you have to hold their hands, explain them things in a different way, give them additional reading, and that quite often helps. And the same thing you have to do for very good students. They may feel bored because they are able to absorb things very well. In fact, one student met me after a class in which there was a longish derivation presented. And he said, sir, if you do this, then the whole derivation can be done maybe in 1/3 the number of steps and maybe half the time or even less than that. He said, yes, but then you will understand. The majority of the class will not understand. And I think he told me that he appreciated that. And after that, at least he didn't have any complaints about this. Thank you.
Professor Patwardhan, thank you very much. Particularly thank you because this was something of this kind I had put up in a paper called, long time ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on a paper called To Teach or Bypass. I don't know whether it is there with, I can share that with you. Okay, and this was Professor Dhamdere's time, I guess. So there were some sessions held in the Gulmohar's, so I had given that, I can share that with you. So one of the points I made at the time was to have a session like this so that interested younger faculty, particularly get mentored a little bit. It was very important. So good teachers should actually, do that. So thank you for that. Secondly, I thank you again because you are giving me the chance to put up PowerPoint presentation. Because I asked him before whether I should do that. I could do that. He said you could do that, provided it's within 7 minutes, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So times have changed for teaching, okay, and research, and in examinations as well. So those are the kinds of things that we used to do before. Answer all questions in 1995, answer any 5 questions in 2000, 2010, answer either A or B, 2015, at least read the question paper. And today we are saying, you please come to the, at least, come to the classroom. I mean, that's something. So academic preparation is, I think, something very important, I believe. Okay, those who do not know the torment of the unknown cannot have the joy of discovery. If a student doesn't find that drive to learn something, it's going to be very difficult to teach him or her. Okay, so that's something which you have to enthuse. I try to do that. Okay, and I believe that originality is more important than just rote learning exams. So I always give them this example of Parkinson versus Thomson. Some of you know this probably historical story of Thomson is none other than Lord Kelvin. Okay, he was the second best in the class, but he made a mark. Parkinson always got full marks in the exam, but never went anywhere. Nobody knows Parkinson. Everybody knows Lord Kelvin, Thomson. So this is something which I try to convey to most of the students. Okay, understand, and obviously aptitude to do this. You can just do by rote learning. What are questions? What are answers? So they could remember these structures, pictures. I don't know what that is. It's in Chinese. Okay, so you can always match those, and this is exactly what happens in some of the exams. Okay, they have not understood it, but so I try to tell them that there is a meaning for each of them, and that can be used, in real life, rather than simply, matching things. The other thing I would like to, I tell the students is that you should teach the habits of discipline without confining the wings of fancy. So it's very important for us. This is one aspect I'm very particular about. Okay. The other thing is, which I emphasize quite a bit, is the integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, and knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. Particularly applies to biotechnology and many of these things, because bioterrorism and things like that. So I can actually relate to them, and at the end I relate it to the value system basically. So they really appreciate what you do and what you learn, how you actually use it. You cannot confuse science with technology. Accepting technology depends on ethical and ethnic value systems. So that's something which I really cover. For everything I teach, I try to relate to society. That's probably gives them a good first-hand impression, and also to see whether they can relate to what they are doing in the real life. As many times, so test tube babies, tripartite fusion, a large number of things. For example, there is herbicide resistance coming up in the market. So things like that, which are very relevant to the society, try to cover that, and that gives them, they ask questions. See, they have to understand before they ask questions whether I should accept this GM potato or not, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so this is something which is valuable. Obviously, I teach them a bit of Panchatantra, saying that, you should know the technology, but you should also know the values, what is general common sense. Okay, the fourth friend who is sitting on the tree doesn't get killed by the lion. I'm sure, and many of you know the story. Okay. So what I want from academics, which I try to convey, is that passion versus profession. Academics, teaching is not a profession, it is actually a passion for me, So you cannot consider the student as a customer. Some of us do, but I think it's not a good thing to do. Okay, he or she is not a customer. Actually, it's a passion rather than profession. So the kinds of qualities I saw from my own teachers, and not in one teacher, but in different teachers. For example, I had a very good teacher who was not very good in the classroom, but he's an excellent mentor. So he would give me a lot of mental, moral support. Okay, but not a good teacher. There is another teacher who was terrible in interacting with me, but an excellent teacher. Subject. So I think you get most of it. You know what exactly you are trying to get from your teacher. So subject delivery is something which many of my colleagues said. Today it's kind of mute because you just Google up something, you get all the information. But information is not knowledge. Okay, and that's probably what we should convey in the classroom. That's what I see. So real life example, one day I said, okay, this is available in the Google up. Curiously, 10 students Googled up because they all had mobile. Okay, they looked at the title, sir, it's here. So then you tell me what it means, that they don't know. See, that's exactly what happens. So it's important to know that subject delivery versus actual, conveying what it means. Of course, you bring in a lot of research into the classroom, and not necessarily very high-fly research, but at least research which relates to the basics so that they can remember. Okay, and obviously you have to mentor them. You have to have a lot of time outside classroom. Not just in the classroom, outside classroom. So it's not like 4 to 5 every day or something. Whenever they come, they come inside. You should be able to spend time, okay? And that gives them a lot of flexibility. Okay, so obviously you have to put in the value system. As I said, that it's not enough to know the subject. It's not enough to be master of the subject, but also you should know when to use it, when not to use it. Okay, so that's something which we convey. Biology being very close to living human beings, so it's much more important for me than probably some other disciplines. So teaching also has become a profession in which it is impossible to do well unless you are some kind of a martyr. Bruce Alberts is the famous biologist who said that, so I thought just quote that to you here. Okay, so this is something I'm sure many of you know. The best teachers are those who show you where to look but don't tell you what to see. Okay. And this is Alexander von Humboldt. Humboldt had to say this about his mentor. I think a good mentor, a good teacher is that the truth itself is precious, but even more precious is the skill to find it. Okay, so that's something which is very critical, and we should, I think, at least I try to live to that. Instead of just giving them ready-made, dish, you should make them learn it on their own as much as possible. So that's something which I try to do. Okay, so these are a few things which are my own experience. Pain before an exam or pain after the exam. So you take very much time. It's like Hemingway said, easy writing makes hard reading. Okay, you take a lot of time to set up a good question paper. Okay, you take very little time to correct the answers. Okay, if you take very little time and do a sloppy question paper, you take hours and hours and weeks to write correct the answer paper. Then very ambiguous. Everybody will come back to you with a crib. So this is what I do very carefully, is that I design the question paper so carefully that it's easy to correct, and at least a few topics are taught by the exam. So I have a lot of feedback from students saying that I learned from your exam. This is something very important for me, because it's not just enough to teach in the classroom. The way you ask a question also, they will get to know it. Not in the exam, but probably go outside and read it. Okay, so relevant history is what I use quite often. History is a very good teacher. You don't remember many of the concepts, but if you teach in the context of the history, you very much remember those concepts. Okay, so this is what I found, that I always use historical context to teach a topic, teach a particular aspect. Okay, and obviously there are not great rewards in teaching. I know that this is one of the rewards, but it also comes very late, I guess, in the IIT system. But the greatest reward is see a sparkle in the eye of a student when he understood something or she understood something. See that face glows, it just glows like that. So, and that is the greatest pleasure you can get. That is the greatest pleasure, and no amount of money can give you that kind of a pleasure. That's what I believe. Okay, so I will close with that, and just to tell you just one or two things. I have taught small classes and large classes, and particularly to try to address the weaker students. I taught in IIT Dharwad, and I taught a BB 101 course with 120 students. And there was one electrical engineering student who was pretty good rank, but was never coming to class, not happy. So you have to talk to them. So I talked to this person, and then he says, "Sir, I'm not interested. My father told me to come here. I have come. Okay, but then what do I do now? No, I'm interested in composing. I'm interested in composing Western classical music. I mean, this is amazing for a kid of that age, 18, 19 years. And I said, so what is your branch? Electrical engineering. Okay, he says electrical engineering. So do you know that you can use electrical engineering to do a good bit of high level of studying of music? He said, no, I don't know. I want to do it now. Then I said, you get a degree and do that as well. So I just gave the example of Professor Preeti Rao and said, Google up. Just Google up, what electrical engineers can do for music. Okay, so he was very impressed. He was extremely impressed. So weaker students need to be handheld. This is what I believe. But they need to also be guided in some sense. He did extremely well in biology after that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences, thoughts on teaching process.